The morning sun had not yet risen when Jin-Ho woke up in his wooden cabin. The air was cold, and his breath made small clouds in front of his face. He lived alone in the mountains of South Korea, far from the bright cities and their flying cars. While the world had changed much in the year 2157, Jin-Ho preferred the old ways. He got up from his bed and walked to the kitchen. The wooden floor creaked under his feet. His cabin had no fancy food makers or robot helpers like the ones in the city. Instead, he had simple things: a wood stove, some pots and pans, and his hunting gear. Jin-Ho made his morning tea and looked out the window. The mountains were dark shapes against the purple sky. Today would be a good day for hunting. His food supply was getting low, and he needed fresh meat. He put on his thick hunting clothes and checked his gear. First, he picked up his grandfather's old rifle. It was made of wood and metal, not like the new plastic guns from the city. The rifle had helped feed his family for 3 generations. Next to it stood his modern hunting tools, a heat sensor and animal tracker. Jin-Ho didn't like using them much, but they helped him hunt without wasting time. Another day, another hunt, he said to himself as he filled his water bottle. His voice sounded rough from not talking much. Living alone in the mountains meant he rarely spoke to anyone. Outside, the forest was waking up. Birds sang their morning songs, and small animals rushed through the leaves on the ground. Jin-Ho checked the wind direction by throwing some dry grass in the air. A good hunter always needed to stay downwind from their prey. He walked quietly through the forest, his feet finding safe spots without making noise. Years of hunting had taught him how to move like a shadow. The sun was now starting to rise, painting the sky in orange and pink colors. Jin-Ho stopped to look at some deer tracks in the soft ground. They were fresh. His tracker beeped softly, showing that a large animal was nearby. But Jin-Ho didn't need the machine to know that. He could smell the deer, and he heard the soft sound of leaves being eaten. He moved forward slowly, keeping his body low. Through the morning mist, he saw the deer. It was a big one, feeding on some leaves without knowing he was there. Jin-Ho raised his rifle slowly. His grandfather had taught him to respect the animals he hunted. "Take only what you need," the old man had said, "and use everything you take." Just as he was about to pull the trigger, a strange sound filled the air. It was like nothing Jin-Ho had ever heard before, a high-pitched whine that got louder and louder. The deer's head shot up, and it ran away into the forest. Jin-Ho looked up at the sky, his mouth open in surprise. Something bright was falling through the clouds. It left a trail of blue fire behind it, and it was heading straight for the forest. Jin-Ho watched as it crashed through the trees not far from where he stood. The ground shook, and birds flew from their nests in fear. For a moment, Jin-Ho stood still, his rifle pointed at nothing. The old ways had taught him to be careful of strange things, but something inside him wanted to know what had fallen from the sky. He checked his rifle, took a deep breath, and started walking toward the crash site. His quiet hunting morning had just become something very different. Jin-Ho moved carefully through the forest toward the crash site. Smoke rose above the trees, and he could smell something burning. It wasn't like wood smoke from a campfire. This smell was sharp and strange, like melted metal. The morning mist made it hard to see clearly. Jin-Ho held his rifle ready, though he wasn't sure it would help against whatever had fallen from the sky. His modern tracker was going crazy, showing readings it had never shown before. As he got closer, he saw broken trees marking the path of the crash. Some were still smoking. The object had cut through the forest like a knife, leaving a long track in the ground. Jin-Ho followed this path, staying close to the trees for cover. Then he saw it. In a small clearing lay something that looked like a silver egg, about the size of a small car. Half of it was buried in the ground, and blue lights flickered along its side. Jin-Ho had seen pictures of spaceships in the news, but this looked different. It was smoother, more natural looking, like a giant water drop made of metal. A hole had opened in the side of the ship. Steam or smoke came out of it, making it hard to see inside. Jin-Ho heard something moving in there. His hands gripped his rifle tighter, but he remembered his grandfather's words. Fear makes quick decisions, but wisdom makes right ones. He waited and watched. A shape appeared in the smoke. At first, Jin-Ho thought it was a large bird, but as it came out of the ship, he realized it was something he had never seen before. The creature was about as tall as him, walking on two legs. Its body was covered in something like feathers, but they glowed with soft blue and green lights. Its face was cat-like, with large eyes that seemed to shine with intelligence. The creature was hurt. It limped as it walked, and one of its arm-like wings was held close to its body. When it saw Jin-Ho, it stopped moving. They looked at each other for what felt like a long time. Jin-Ho noticed that the creature's eyes changed color slightly, from blue to a gentle purple. To his surprise, he wasn't scared. The creature seemed more afraid of him than he was of it. It made a soft chirping sound and reached slowly toward a device on what looked like a belt around its waist. Jin-Ho raised his rifle slightly, not aiming but ready. The device made some static noises, then spoke in broken Korean. Help, not harm. Scientist. Peaceful. The voice was mechanical, but had a musical quality to it. Jin-Ho lowered his rifle slowly. The creature's shoulders relaxed a little. It, or maybe she, Jin-Ho thought, based on her movements and voice, tried to take a step forward but stumbled. Without thinking, Jin-Ho moved to catch her before she fell. Her feathers were soft and warm under his hands, and the glow from them lit up his face. Up close, he could see that her cap-like face had markings that looked like silver stars. She made another chirping sound, and her translator spoke again. Thank. Injured. Ship damaged. Jin-Ho looked around. The morning was getting brighter, and soon others might come to investigate the crash. He could hear distant vehicles, probably the authorities already on their way. He had to make a decision quickly. He had come to the forest looking for meat to fill his freezer. Instead, he had found something much more interesting. As the sound of vehicles got closer, Jin-Ho made his choice. He carefully helped the alien to stand straight and pointed toward his cabin. She seemed to understand and nodded, her feathers glowing a bit brighter. Together, they started moving through the forest, away from the crash site. Jin-Ho's morning hunt had turned into something very different indeed. He had become the protector of a being from another world. Jin-Ho's cabin came into view just as the sun fully rose above the mountains. The alien leaned heavily on him as they walked. Her feathers had stopped glowing as brightly, which Jin-Ho thought might be a bad sign. They could hear aircraft in the distance, but the thick forest kept them hidden. Inside the cabin, Jin-Ho helped her sit on his old wooden chair. She looked around the cabin with interest, her large eyes taking in everything. Her translator made some static sounds before speaking again. Safe here. Thank you. Jin-Ho nodded and went to get his first aid kit. When he returned, the alien was examining his grandfather's old hunting photos on the wall. She pointed to them and made a series of musical sounds. The translator crackled. You hunt. For food? Not sport. Yes, for food, Jin-Ho answered. He opened the first aid kit and looked at her injured wing arm. I need to help with this. Will you let me? The alien's eyes changed color to a soft green. She held out her injured limb. Up close, Jin-Ho could see that under the feathers, her skin was silvery, like moonlight on water. The injury wasn't as bad as he had feared, mostly bruises and a small cut. As he cleaned and bandaged the wound, the alien worked on her translator. The static decreased, and her words became clearer. I am scientist. Study earth animals. Ship had problem. Crashed. She paused, then made an adjustment to the device. You may call me Ura. Real name too difficult for human speech. I'm Jin-Ho, he said, finishing with the bandage. Why were you studying earth animals? Ura's feathers rippled with colors as she answered. My people love life. All life. We study to protect, to understand. Earth has many species. Very interesting. She looked at his rifle in the corner. You hunt, but with respect. I saw in your mind when you helped me. You follow old ways. Jinho was surprised. You can read minds. No, no. Era's translator spoke quickly. Feel emotions, sense intentions. All my people can. Helps us understand life better. She stood up carefully, testing her bandaged limb. Much better. Thank you, Jinho. The sound of helicopters grew louder. Jinho went to the window and saw several black shapes moving over the distant trees. They're looking for you, he said. Era moved beside him to look. Government people. They want ship, want technology. Not ready for it. She turned to Jinho. Need time to call my people. Need to hide until then. Jinho thought for a moment. He lived alone because he liked the quiet, liked the old ways. Now he was hiding an alien in his home. But something about Era's respect for life, for the natural world, made sense to him. It was like his grandfather's teachings about hunting with respect. You can stay, he said. I know places in the mountains where they won't find us. But first, you need to eat and rest. Era's feathers glowed brighter, and her eyes turned a warm gold color. She reached into a pouch at her belt and pulled out a small silver cube. Share food from my world, she offered. Equal trade for your help. Jinho smiled for the first time that morning. His quiet life had just become much more interesting. As the sound of searchers grew closer, he began to plan how to hide and protect his unusual new guest. The silver cube Era had offered turned out to contain food that looked like glowing blue crystals. Jinho held one up to the light, watching colors shift inside it. It's safe for humans, Era assured him through her translator. Changes to match what your body needs. Jinho carefully put the crystal in his mouth. It melted like snow, tasting like the best meat soup he had ever eaten. While they shared their meal, Era explained more about her work. My people study life on many worlds, she said, her feathers making gentle patterns of light. Earth is special. So many different animals, plants. But your people are changing things quickly. We watch, try to understand, try to help without being seen. Jinho nodded. Even in his lifetime, he had seen many changes in the forest. Some animals were gone now, and new buildings appeared every year. That's why I live here, he said, to keep the old ways alive. Era's eyes turned a deep blue with interest. Old ways are important. Balance is important. She stood up carefully, testing her bandaged wing arm. Need to get things from ship. Important research data. Tools to call my people. Jinho looked out the window. The helicopters were still searching, but they had moved to the other side of the mountain. It's not safe yet, he said. But I know these mountains better than they do. We can go at night. Era's translator hummed as she asked. You will help more. Already done much. You understand about protecting nature, Jinho replied. That makes you a friend. He checked his hunting gear, adding extra supplies for their night journey. But first, you need better clothes. Those feathers glow too bright. He found an old coat and helped Era put it on. Her feathers dimmed until they were barely visible. Can control light, she explained. Part of how we study animals. Become invisible when needed. They spent the day preparing. Jinho taught Era how to move quietly through the forest, while she showed him how her translator worked. She even fixed his animal tracker, making it work better than when it was new. Technology not always bad, she said as she worked. Problem is balance. Your people get excited about new things, forget old wisdom. As the sun began to set, they heard vehicles on the mountain road near the cabin. Jinho looked out carefully and saw black cars with government markings. Men in dark suits were talking to someone. Director Naeum here, Era said, her translator picking up bits of conversation from outside. Very determined hunter. Like you, but hunts secrets, not food. Jinho smiled at the comparison. Then we must be better at hiding. He began packing a small bag with supplies. I know caves in the mountains, places they won't think to look. We can hide there after we get your things from the ship. Era touched the bandage on her wing arm. Why help so much? Could turn me in. Government would pay well. Jin-Ho thought about his grandfather's teachings. Money doesn't help the forest, he said simply. Knowledge, respect, understanding. These help. You have these things. That's worth protecting. As darkness fell, they prepared to leave the cabin. Era's feathers had dimmed to match the night, and Jin-Ho wore his darkest hunting clothes. Together, they would need all their skills, his knowledge of the land and her alien abilities, to survive what was coming. The night was dark and cold as Jin-Ho and Era moved through the forest. The moon was hidden behind clouds, which helped them stay unseen. They could hear vehicles on the mountain roads and see flashlight beams moving through the trees below. Director Ne-young had set up a command center near the crash site. Jin-Ho and Era watched from behind some thick bushes as people in protective suits examined the silver ship. Large lights had been set up around the area, making it look like daytime. Too many guards, Jin-Ho whispered. We need a distraction. Era's translator hummed softly as she replied. Can help with that. She pulled something small and round from her belt pouch. Makes animals excited. Not harmful, but they will run around. Create confusion. Jin-Ho nodded, understanding the plan. He had seen how animals running through the forest could confuse people who didn't know the land well. He pointed to a darker part of the forest. Throw it there. Animals will run through their lights. Era activated the device and threw it with her good arm. For a few moments, nothing happened. Then they heard it. The sound of many animals moving through the forest. Deer, wild boars, and other creatures suddenly ran past the crash site. The guards turned their lights toward the animals, trying to understand what was happening. Now, Jin-Ho said. They moved quickly toward the ship while everyone was distracted. Era went inside through the broken opening while Jin-Ho kept watch. He could hear Director Ne-young giving orders, telling her people to check why the animals were acting strange. Inside the ship, Era worked fast. She gathered her research data and tools, putting them in a small bag that seemed to hold more than it should. Jin-Ho heard footsteps coming closer and made a quiet bird call, their warning signal. Era emerged from the ship just as flashlight beams swept near them. They pressed themselves against the cool metal of the ship, trying not to move. Jin-Ho could hear Director Ne-young's voice clearly now. Something set off those animals, she was saying. Check the ship again. And I want more sensors set up. Our visitor might try to return for their equipment. Jin-Ho touched Era's arm and pointed to a path he knew, one that would take them through the densest part of the forest. They began to move, staying low and stepping carefully. Era's feathers were completely dark now, making her almost invisible. They were almost clear when Jin-Ho's foot found a loose rock. It rolled down the hill, making more rocks fall. The sound seemed very loud in the quiet forest. Flashlights turned toward them immediately. There, movement in the trees, someone shouted. Don't let them escape. Director Ne-young ordered. Use the thermal cameras. Jin-Ho pulled Era behind a large tree as lights and people began moving their way. He knew they needed another distraction, but the animal caller had been used. Then he remembered something his grandfather had taught him about hunting. Sometimes the best way to hide was to be obvious somewhere else. He pulled out his grandfather's rifle and fired one shot high into the air. The sound echoed through the mountains. As he expected, all the lights and people turned toward the sound. But Jin-Ho and Era were already moving in the opposite direction, toward the hidden caves he knew would keep them safe. Director Ne-young's angry voice faded behind them as they disappeared into the dark forest. They had what they needed from the ship, but their troubles were far from over. The cave Jin-Ho had chosen was deep in the mountains, hidden behind a waterfall. Inside, it was dry and quiet. The sound of falling water would hide any noise they made. Jin-Ho started a small fire, keeping it low so the smoke would disperse through the natural holes in the cave ceiling. Era set up her equipment on a flat rock. Her devices created soft lights that danced on the cave walls. "Need to send message to my people," she explained through her translator. "But signal must be careful. Government people have good sensors." While they waited for her message to send, Jin-Ho prepared a simple meal from his hunting pack. He offered some dried meat to Era, and she shared more of her crystal food with him. As they ate, Era showed him the research data she had saved from her ship. "Look," she said, making her devices project images in the air. "These are animals from my world." Jin-Ho watched in amazement as strange creatures appeared before them. Some looked like glowing fish that swam through air, others like trees that could walk. "Beautiful," Jin-Ho said quietly. "Do you hunt them?" Era's feathers shifted to a thoughtful blue color. "No need to hunt. Long ago, my people learned to make food from light and basic materials. But we remember hunting times. Important part of our history." She looked at Jin-Ho's rifle. "You're hunting different. You take life, but with respect. With purpose." Jin-Ho nodded. "My grandfather taught me that everything is connected. Take too much, everything suffers. Take with respect, everything stays in balance." "Yes." Era's translator became excited. "Same teaching on my world. Different words, same wisdom." She made more images appear. "See, my people build cities in trees, underwater, in sky, but always leave space for other life. Balance." As they shared stories, Jin-Ho realized that despite coming from different worlds, they understood many of the same truths. Era's people had found ways to keep their old wisdom while moving forward with technology. The peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of helicopters passing nearby. Jin-Ho and Era quickly put out their fire and waited in darkness. Era's feathers provided just enough light to see by, glowing very faintly. "Director Nayoung is very dedicated," Era said softly. "Reminds me of scientists on my world. Wants to understand everything. But sometimes understanding takes time. Your people want quick answers." "Is that why you study us in secret?" Jin-Ho asked. "Yes, some humans ready for us, like you. Others," she gestured toward the sound of helicopters, "need more time. Need to find balance first." Jin-Ho thought about how his own life had balanced old and new ways. He used modern tools to help his hunting, but he never forgot the old wisdom that guided how to use them. "Your people will come soon?" he asked. Era checked her devices. Message sent. Now wait for answer. Could be days. She looked at Jin-Ho with her color-changing eyes. "Sorry to bring trouble to your quiet life." Jin-Ho smiled. "Quiet is good, but learning is better." He began to set up their sleeping areas in the cave. "Rest now. Tomorrow I will show you more of the forest. Many things here to add to your research." Outside, they could hear the searchers still looking for them. But in the cave, two beings from different worlds had found common ground in their respect for life and the wisdom of finding balance. 3 days passed in the mountain cave. Jin-Ho and Era spent their time carefully moving between different hiding spots, always staying ahead of Director Nayoung's search teams. During quiet moments, Era taught Jin-Ho about the stars and other worlds, while he showed her the secret paths and hidden places of the forest. On the morning of the 4th day, Era's equipment made a soft chiming sound. Her feathers lit up with excitement as she read the message. "My people are coming," she said through her translator. "Will arrive tonight when the moon is highest." Jin-Ho felt both happy and sad at this news. He had grown used to having someone to talk to, someone who understood his love for the forest and its ways. "Where will they meet you?" he asked. Era showed him a map on one of her devices. "Open area here," she pointed to a high meadow. "But government people watch this place now. Many sensors, many guards." Jin-Ho knew the meadow she meant. It was a beautiful place where he sometimes went to watch stars. Now it was filled with military trucks and equipment. Director Nayoung had guessed that any rescue would need a clear landing spot. As they watched from their hidden place in the trees, they saw more vehicles arriving. Director Nayoung stood next to a large machine, talking to her team. Era's translator picked up pieces of their conversation. Signal detected. Spacecraft approaching. Prepare capture devices. The translator crackled with the distant words. Must secure the alien technology. Era's feathers darkened with worry. They planned to capture rescue ship. Very dangerous. My people's ships, not made for fighting, could be damaged. People could be hurt. Jin-Ho thought carefully about what they should do. He could help Era reach the meadow. He knew ways to get past the guards. But that would reveal he had helped her. The government would know someone had hidden her. His quiet life in the forest would end. You helped me, Era said softly, sensing his thoughts. Put yourself in danger. Can find another place to meet rescue ship. Farther away. Safer for you. But Jin-Ho remembered his grandfather's words about making right choices, not easy ones. He looked at the equipment in the meadow, then at the worried alien who had become his friend. He made his decision. I know how to get you there, he said. But first, we need to remove their equipment. Make them chase shadows while you reach your people. Era's eyes changed to a bright gold color. Like hunting, she said. Make prey look one way, move another way. Jin-Ho smiled and began drawing in the dirt, showing his plan. They would use everything they had learned from each other. His knowledge of the land and her technology. It would be dangerous, but together they had a chance. Director Nayoung thinks like a city hunter, Jin-Ho explained. Follows machines and maps. We think like forest hunters. Follow instinct, follow wisdom. As the sun began to set, they prepared themselves. Era adjusted her translator and checked her remaining devices. Jin-Ho loaded his rifle and packed only what they would need. The next few hours would change everything, for both of them. The night was clear and cold when they put their plan into action. Jin-Ho had placed Era's animal calling devices in 3 different places around the meadow. At his signal, she activated them all at once. Just as before, animals began running through the forest, but this time from multiple directions. Director Nayoung's team turned on their bright lights, trying to track all the movement. Check every heat signal, she ordered through her radio. Don't let them slip past. While the guards were distracted, Jin-Ho and Era moved quietly through the shadows. They had covered themselves with mud to hide from the thermal cameras. Jin-Ho led them through a small stream to further mask their heat signals. When they reached the edge of the meadow, Jin-Ho took out his grandfather's rifle. He aimed carefully at the power generators feeding the government's equipment. 2 shots rang out in the night. The generators sparked and went dark. Many of the lights and sensors stopped working. Move now, Jin-Ho whispered. They ran toward the center of the meadow as confusion spread among the search teams. Era's feathers began to glow brighter, sending a signal to her approaching rescue ship. Director Nayoung spotted them. There, in the meadow, she shouted. Surround them. But before her teams could move, a soft humming filled the air. High above, clouds began to glow with beautiful colors. A ship much larger than Era's crashed vessel appeared, hovering silently over the meadow. It looked like a giant silver leaf floating in the wind. The government teams raised their weapons, but their equipment started failing. Era explained quickly, ship's protection field. Stops harmful things. Not permanent, but gives time. A beam of gentle light came down from the ship. Era turned to Jin-Ho. Come with me, she said through her translator. My people would welcome you. So much to learn, to share. Jin-Ho looked at the beautiful ship, then at the forest around him. He smiled and shook his head. My place is here, he said. Someone must keep the old ways, must teach others about balance. Era's feathers made patterns of blue and gold. Happiness mixed with sadness. She reached into her bag and pulled out 2 items. The first was one of her silver food cubes. The second was a small device. Food maker, she explained, and translator, to talk to forest animals. small things, but useful for a hunter who respects life. Jin-ho accepted the gifts. Director Na-young was organizing her people for another attempt to approach. Time was short. "Will you come back?" Jin-ho asked. "Forest full of life to study," Era replied. Her eyes sparkled with different colors. "Need good guide to help study it properly." She stepped into the beam of light. As she rose toward the ship, her feathers glowed with all the colors Jin-ho had seen in their time together. The ship disappeared as quietly as it had arrived, leaving the meadow in darkness. Director Na-young's teams found nothing but footprints in the mud. Jin-ho was already back in his cabin by then, looking at his new gifts. He had gone hunting for meat, but had found something much better: a friend from the stars and a new way to understand the forest he loved. Now, sometimes on quiet nights, Jin-ho sits outside his cabin. He uses Era's translator to listen to the forest animal stories. And sometimes, when he sees unusual lights in the sky, he smiles, knowing his friend is up there, studying life among the stars.